So today we're joined by Robin Dunbar. He is our social connection and friendship advisor for Beluga Pods. And Robin Dunbar is an evolutionary psychologist best known for Dunbar's number, the idea that humans can maintain about 150 stable relationships. His research explores how our brains shape social connection, friendship, and well-being. And he's helping us at Beluga Pods to tackle loneliness, break stigma, and help people feel more connected. So we're here by Robin today. So thank you so much for your time. It's lovely to chat as always. So one of the questions I want to ask you is, why does the pandemic of loneliness hit us, do you think, when it has never been an issue before in society?
Well, I guess it's not that people have never been lonely ever until recently, but that somehow the environment in which we are now living has changed dramatically. So the places you can go to meet people have just sort of disappeared, right? Pubs once upon a time used to be places you went and just had a drink and talked to people randomly around the bar. Now they're restaurants, so you go in twos or threes and you don't talk to the people on the table next to you. So there's been a sort of complete sea change in that sense, or a loss perhaps of the possibilities that you can have going out and meeting new people. And the temptation that on the other side of the coin has been that it's easier and cheaper to sit in and watch something on television that amuses you than sort of go out somewhere where you don't know anybody, you can't find anybody to talk to. So there's a combination of things that seems to have happened. I think that's been compounded by the fact that so many of us now end up working in places where we don't know anybody at all. We don't know anywhere to go to meet people even. So, the classic case is your first job after university. Your life up to then has been sort of provided for you. You've got a natural sort of social community provided for you, either by school or your parents or university or whatever it may be. And then suddenly you get a job in a strange city, it's probably called London. And, you don't know where to go to meet people. And the only people you know are people at work. And, they've got things to do at 5 o'clock when they want to go home. And you're sort of left, chewing your pencil at your desk, wondering what on earth you can do for the rest of the evening. So I think those pressures have all sort of come together over the last, well, actually it's about 30 years since people first started to notice this effect coming through, this loneliness pandemic, as it were. And it's just got worse and worse as time has gone on.
Yeah, definitely really interesting. And I think the lack of third spaces, like you say, is really difficult for people to meet and, because everything's expensive now. So what do you think is linked to loneliness? Do you think social media has a massive part to play in this as well, and the kind of anxious generation that we all hear and talk about?
Well, at one level, of course, social media is a wonderful tool because it does provide an opportunity to meet people. But it's clear that it has enormous downsides. And one is that it just exposes you to too many people, and too many people who are clearly having fun because they're posting, their photographs of themselves doing exciting things or having exciting dinners or whatever it may be, while you're sitting in your lonely bedsit, not being able to go out. And that clearly has increased the sense of isolation and loneliness overall. But there's also a sense, sadly, in which it exposes you to lots of beautiful people. And makes you feel that you're not very beautiful because you can't aspire to their standards, as it were, of elegance and wealth and whatever. And it leaves you then feeling depressed about the state of life that you have to put up with, which in the past you would have just accepted. That's how it is. Friends are very similar to you, the people you know.
Yeah.
Now I'm afraid, they're being able to dip into the lives of B-list celebrities, never mind the A-listers, and see what a wonderful time they have, and big houses and fancy yachts and all this kind of thing. Well, it's depressing. It's depressing for everybody.
But I think the thing is that people forget is that that's someone's like 1% of their life. Like it's
Yeah,
not the full picture, isn't it? And I think people
that's right.
forget that, and then they may do it themselves, and then obviously it feeds in there to this whole cycle. You know, we just don't know, and people have these kind of loose connections and follows, don't you think? So it kind of is difficult for people to have this 150 number that you suggest, because people have too many. It's overwhelming. So what are your
Yes.
thoughts on that?
Well, the reality is, even in the days before the internet, we knew more than 150 people. The
Yeah.
150 people is people you have meaningful relationships with. And a good chunk of those, typically about half of those, would be family, extended family.
Mhm.
You know, all your cousins and second cousins and aunties and uncles and so on. But we would know more people than that. We would know more people than that in the village or in the town where we lived. Many of these would be casual passing acquaintances, but you know, of the kind where you'd nod and say hello as you walk past in the street because you know who they are, and you might, you know, spend a couple of minutes just passing the time of day with them. But you know, you wouldn't call them best friends or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that transfers very easily onto the internet. You see it in things like social media. People have their core of 150 friends and family that they interact most with and post most to, but then they've got this sort of periphery group of people who you think of more as acquaintances rather than friends in real life.
Mhm.
It's just social media doesn't distinguish. Often we distinguish
Yeah.
because we don't post to these people,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
they become kind of voyeurs looking in on your breakfast
Yeah.
photographs, and
Exactly.
you know,
I
that, and
Yeah.
it creates this sense of, you know, oh my goodness, you know, all sorts of people are going to actually be seeing what I'm up to, and maybe I don't want all sorts of people. Whereas, of course, in real life in the village, as it were,
Yeah.
those people didn't see what you were up to because you only bumped into them now and again.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that's an interesting point with technology. Obviously, it's good, but obviously there is no break. And I think we have
Yeah,
people that have, you know, we've got so many WhatsApp messages, so many messages. It's
yeah,
difficult to maintain friends because people are overwhelmed. It makes people anxious, and people want to reach out, but then you know, this
yeah.
avoidant tendency. So what do you think to that?
Well, it's been very noticeable since the appearance of email, which, you know, probably most people don't remember, hasn't
Yeah.
always been with us, but it has been with us for a very long time. But it was very striking that in the old days, of course, everybody wrote to each other, wrote letters. So you
Mm.
would write a letter, and maybe somebody would just drop you a note in reply, answering a question or just saying thank you, and that would be the end of it. I've just noticed this terrible temptation with email to sort of go on endlessly replying
Yeah.
to the reply you've just had, and you know, it just fills up your email box with
Yeah.
unnecessary communications. But also, as you say, you've then got this incredible intrusiveness where it's very easy for complete strangers to email you out of the blue.
Mm. Yeah.
And worse than complete strangers, you know, sort of scammers and fraudsters
Yeah. Yeah.
and all
Exactly.
sorts of
Yeah.
dodgy folk, you know, filling up your inbox with messages you really don't want to read anyway,
Yeah. No.
but you're afraid not to read in case it's important.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. It's not
So that,
knowing what
so
that thing.
there is that, but I think much the most important thing is this distinction between really real face-to-face friends and online friends, as it were. Now, the core friends that matter to us are in both environments. We
Mhm.
actually make the effort to go and see them, and they're the ones that really matter. And it's those friends that have this huge impact on your psychological health and well-being and your physical health and well-being.
Mhm.
And now the amount of medical evidence for this is just phenomenal. It's far more
Yeah.
important than anything else that, you know, your friendly neighborhood GP does for you in
Yeah.
terms of medicines and what have you, is simply the number and quality of close friends that you have, that you do stuff with, that you go out with, you laugh with, you dance with, you sing with. um, you know, and that number is actually quite small. The optimal number seems to be about 5, these close friends.
Mhm.
If you have about 5, give or take a few, obviously for individual differences, but about 5 on average, your mental health and your physical health is infinitely improved. I mean, it really makes a massive difference. And you don't need all the kind of medicines and
Yeah.
drugs and other stuff to keep you going, because the friendship the physical components of friendship produce these internal effects which buffer you against both the sense of depression, and because of that, then in the process also tune up the immune system and make you actually immune to the kinds of silly winter viruses and stuff like that, which we otherwise, fall prey to and become sick from. But if you've got friends that bolster you and you do all these kind of social things with, the body seems to, be much more resilient to most of these things. And, you don't have to spend all day in bed recovering from, some dreadful cold or whatever it might be. You bounce out of bed and away you go.
Exactly. It's always one of these things that you feel rubbish, but then sometimes when you're around people, sometimes it can always
Yeah.
make it better. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
sometimes the case. So do you think social connection is like the key for like positive health in society, but also kind of more deep rooted than that in like public health, but also workplace, and things like that? Because
Well, I think it has big knock-on consequences for the workplace, because what seems to have happened is the level of isolation, social isolation that people have, and not being able to go out and meet with their friends so easily. Perhaps if only because they live on the other side of a big city, and therefore it's much more effort to kind of meet up with them, and compared to the days when they just lived around the corner from you. Those kinds of isolation effects give rise to increasing levels of depression. If you're depressed, your immune system is suppressed and you aren't resistant to all these other physical diseases. So you end up taking more time off work, because you can't, literally you're laid low in bed. It's not that you're faking anything, you genuinely are ill. And the result is, not only is it less satisfying for you in terms of your job, because you're not being able to engage with your job, but of course everybody else at work is having to pick up what you weren't being able to do. So there's more load on them. Your employer, is having to fork out to, employ a temp or something like that to fill in the gaps, or things aren't just getting done. So everybody's losing basically all around. And one shudders to think how much money these simple illnesses, which could be cured very easily,
Yeah, exactly.
are costing the economy. I mean, I think the figures have been bandied around as in the billions, tens of billions.
Yeah, exactly. Hundreds of billions actually, but I think loneliness is kind of something that's ironically kind of left behind and not really thought about, because I think it's massively misunderstood, and I think we need to really redefine how it's thought of, and like make it at the forefront of our minds really, and just break these barriers, saying that it won't affect us. How would you think we could go about that, do you think? Because obviously with the 5 friends as well, for positive kind of social connection, that also includes things like helping each other again and things like that.
Yes.
Do you think it's a case of connecting society again for community, or what do you think is needed?
Well, at the end of the day, finding friends is just a matter of opportunities. It's having the place or the environment in which you can meet people. You can't make people be friends with each other. It's the first point to say. It's a very organic process. Everybody knows this from experience. You get on really well with some people, and other people you could take or leave. You don't necessarily dislike them. They're just not as
They're not
much
really
fun or
people.
something like that. They don't gel with you.
Yeah.
And so our problem is we're kind of desperately searching, as you might say, for these sort of soul buddies, they're there. We know they're out there somewhere. It's just searching the haystack to find them is the problem. So the important thing is to have places which provide you with the opportunity to meet people. It's as simple as that. And once upon a time, that was called, the village hall or the village pub or something like that. But those don't exist anymore. So where do you go? So I think the important solution is to find places or environments in which you can at least be exposed to a range of people, and then you can make your own choices. And the process is organic after that. It'll happen.
No, definitely. I think it's that kind of approaching as well in society. I think we don't like speak to each other anymore, do we? We like so connected. Like, and I think, is there a power in good as well if we help someone, for instance, like just speaking to a stranger, like random act of kindness, like how beneficial is that for us as people and society?
Oh, I think it's hugely beneficial from society's point of view, because it creates a sense of belonging to a community, right? And that you can't have a society if it doesn't feel it's a community. It's simply not true that we're all isolated islands, living in an enormous ocean called a nation state. It's not true. A nation state is a society. But if it doesn't have this sense of community, it's simply not going to work. People aren't going to go out of their way to help each other. The big issue in the end becomes not so much that you necessarily go out and help other people. I think that's much more a consequence of having this sense of being part of a community and therefore caring about other people. So you then will, pick up their things when they've dropped them in the street, or knocked over their shopping trolley, or whatever it may be. It's much more about engaging with them in conversation, or a smile, or whatever it may be, or those kind of passing things. So sort of, I mean, quite literally, smile at a stranger and be part of a community, and it creates, and just those kind of things, do genuinely create a sense of uplift and happiness. If somebody smiles at you or says hello as they pass in the street, genuinely does give you this kind of uplift. And even, genuinely so for very old people who don't get out very often. That sense of everyday common worth, as it were. But I think for all of us, whatever age you are, so if somebody takes the trouble to sort of acknowledge you in the street and even have a word, maybe, then it creates this uplift. It puts a smile on the day.
It's human, isn't it? I think
it's human, and it's those activities that actually create, sort of in terms of the brain chemistry of how these things work. They trigger the brain chemistry that produces this sense of warmth and contentedness and communality and belonging that makes the social world go round. And it's a very, very organic thing, and we trigger it through laughter, we trigger it by singing and dancing and eating together, all these kinds of things. But it can be triggered just by these sort of casual, well, I suppose you might think of them as old-fashioned politeness as much.
Exactly. Humanity, community. But I think the problem is that people say they're too busy, and I think people get wrapped up in this feeling, I'm so busy. It takes a few seconds to smile at someone, and that's what we're trying to do at Beluga. Is like, it takes a few seconds, spread a bit of kindness each day, and that those little seconds of kind of kindness add up to a bigger sense of happiness and belonging, I guess, of people, isn't it? And it all adds up.
Yep. I mean, I actually think it is simply a quantitative effect like that, because each time you smile, or laugh, as the case may be, that action triggers the brain chemistry that produces these effects a tiny little bit. And therefore, if you do it once in a day, well, okay, you're probably not going to get an enormous benefit. But it's the difference between sort of walking 5 yards to your front door and back again, and going for a half-hour jog. Right, half-hour jog is lots of little steps, each of which produces this sense of engagement and sense of warmth and communality.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the bigger the effect you get. So the more
Yeah.
often
The ripple effect. Yeah.
it's a ripple effect.
And
Exactly.
it's the same as well, like that one smile, like, not just for your own time and other people. You just don't know how much of an impact it would have on just someone else's day, could you? Because it could turn their day considerably better. And you just never know the impact, do you? So it just shows, although it's a ripple, it could be, could be way
Yes,
deeper.
well, it's a sort of sense of acknowledgement. There's a very, very nice example of this was I came across very recently. Advice that was given, it was actually American football teams, so not even soccer, but one of the coaches, so most of these are associated with universities, teams in America, the coach, sort of said to his proteges, the players, look, when you are in a lift with somebody, you're very famous. Everybody knows who you are. But for you just to spend 2 seconds saying hello, how are you, while the lift is going up and down, is a world experience for
Yeah.
them. It costs you 2 seconds,
Yeah.
but for them to have, spent that little moment with you is an uplifting experience. They'll be talking about it for years to come, and we kind of forget that. I think that even the sort of for us in the general layers of society, as opposed to the famous people, even for us, that little moment of social engagement, cumulatively, when you have enough of it, gives you this sense of uplift.
So true, so true. And I think when you treat everyone kind of the same as well, and everyone is like, not looking at someone and saying, oh, when you look at someone, you have automatic bias. And I think if you treat everyone the same, kind of removing those biases, there's a real power in that.
Yes.
Because wherever you are in life, you could be isolated, whether you're successful, whether you're famous, for instance. Like famous people must be lonely because they're in an isolating environment where they're kind of almost separated from society, aren't they? Because they're put on a pedestal.
Well, I think they probably historically they were the most lonely people of all. If the king or the queen, as the case may be, historically was stuck on a pedestal and was constantly being bothered by people who just wanted favors, who actually weren't interested in having a friendship. I think the rich and the famous and the kind of A-list celebrities, as it were, suffer from that a great deal. They can't walk down the street anonymously. They're constantly being recognized and bothered and followed and what have you. And it's a heck of a kind of pressure that is very difficult to cope with for most people, particularly if you sort of, if you're a pop group, let's say, or a football player who's suddenly been thrust into the limelight with no experience of coping with these things. It is enormous difficulty. And I think a lot of that explains why pop groups break up after quite a short. You expect them to go on forever, but they don't. Actually, their lifespan is only 2 or 3 years on typically, and then they fall out with each other. But I think they fall out with each other not because of themselves, but because they're under this kind of pressure, and it's so isolating up there.
Do you think pressure is one of the core kind of reasons behind loneliness? Because there's pressure, to perform in education, in your work, or online, and it's not just, you don't just have it, you go to your job or you go to school and you come back home now. It's like 24/7. There's no stop. Pressure is constant in all aspects of our lives. So do you think that is the main source of where loneliness has come from, that constant on and the pressure as well associated that people have on themselves?
Up to a point, yes. I mean, but I think that pressure has always been there, except that you could at the end of the day you took it home and you squirreled yourself away with your library books, whatever it was that you were doing, and you did it in the quietness of your garret, as it were. The problem now is you can't escape the public scrutiny because you're constantly being emailed or texted or
it's constant
by the people you work with or the people who are part of the wider general system that's putting that pressure on you. So you can't escape. There's no sort of bolt hole that you can go to. But I don't have a particular problem with the pressure issue, because we all do it and we've always done it. And some of us are more obsessed with what we do than others, and we're happier to go away and into our little shed at the bottom of the garden and tinker with whatever it is that we enjoy tinkering with. It's just the kind of fact that you have to do this in public now.
That's the thing.
I mean, it's true that, and this is as true, I think, of the workplace, because you're always at the end of an email. Sometimes, your not only your bosses but your other colleagues, forget that at the end of the day you do need some time to do home things.
But then how do they do that when their home life and their work life is blurred, those lines? They don't have a differentiation, and they just it's not very good for mental health. People then don't leave their desk, they feel guilty. It's just so what do you think of that?
A good life work balance is clearly important, but I mean it's equally bad to say, well, when you go home at 5 o'clock you must never think about work at all, because actually there are sometimes things that have to be done very quickly, for all sorts of reasons, and in some sense this is also a consequence of the fact that so much of what we do now is group produced. So it's not just you going away and thinking about it and mulling over it while you're having a cup of tea or sitting in the garden idly. It's a group of people having to integrate what they do to produce, I don't know, some code for something, or sort of a product or a design or whatever it may be. And so it's very difficult to escape from that. And I think really at the end of the day you need to have some kind of discipline that allows self-discipline, if you like, and clearly your work environment needs to recognize that, and allow you to have that space that you can recharge your batteries, because that's what it's all about.
I feel like, though, that where there's so much of this now, I don't feel like people have the control anymore. Like, things are dictated to us, even to the extent like AI does everything for us. Like, we almost go, no wonder we're in autopilot. So I do think there is an empowerment that people need to have back the control, and like you say, make these clear boundaries so they do go outside for what, go smile to someone, do all these things. And that's what we're trying to do at Beluga as well. Beluga Pods is like, do those small things to help us get off our phones, reconnect and spread kindness, but then also help people build kind of social connection and friendships. So what are your thoughts on kind of the solution to this? And obviously, like, you're working with us at Beluga Pods to tackle this, but what are your thoughts on what needs to be done and how people can make the steps to do that? Obviously with Beluga Pods as well, but I mean just generally, I think, in your advice.
Well, one key issue clearly has been the advent of smartphones, because you can just see this in the medical statistics. I mean, it's absolutely blatantly obvious that levels of anxiety and depression and so on, particularly among the younger generations, teenagers and the sort of 20-somethings, have just exploded since the appearance of smartphones. It's literally you look at the graph and it's so tight, it's absolutely extraordinary. And that's the problem, has been creating that sense of you're always on call, because of what these things can do. So you're always expecting a text to come, always expecting an email to come, and so you're constantly checking them in case you're being left out. Whereas you didn't worry about that kind of thing. If, Jimmy didn't contact you, you just shrugged your shoulders and, I'll try and remember to knock on his door, sort of sometime when I'm passing. So I think somehow we need to manage the mobile phone environment much better than we do. I mean, we all fall prey to it. Even I do. Moments of boredom, you kind of think, oh, maybe I've got an email. You're not really interested. It's just distraction.
Exactly. So, distraction, exactly.
And of course the other side of it is the classic one. You go and watch, in a pub, or pub now, they're restaurants really, aren't they? You've got a couple sitting there, gone out to dinner. What are they doing? They're looking at their iPhones all evening.
Yeah, no one speaks.
For
No one speaks to each
goodness
other.
sakes, talk to each other.
Yeah, no one speaks to each other, but I don't know, why is
Just
that?
bizarre.
Is it the
So,
social skills? Social
we,
skills, maybe
yeah.
people don't know what to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. I mean, it's true that the longer you've known somebody, in some sense, not only do you have less to talk about because you know how they are and what they like and what they dislike and what they're going to say, so you don't have to ask anymore. But also you're more willing to sort of sit there in silence with something. Well, the problem is if you sit there in silence, you've got that distraction of, oh, I wonder if I've had the
Yeah,
take.
isn't it?
And so
That's the
it's
thing.
so somehow we just need to be more self-disciplined, or maybe they should be banned in restaurants or pubs or something
Exactly.
to
There is
force people to.
some pubs and things I know have that, no phone policy, which I think is really good because it gives you that, like, you can't look at your phone,
Yes.
and I think there's a real power in that, because otherwise you're always reaching for it. But no, I agree. I think we need like barriers in place to help us, like, actually, because the thing is we need to be told. I think that's a problem in society. Like, people need to be told these things. And so I think just want to try and nudge people off their phones in a way that helps them feel supported, but in a way that creates these boundaries. But I think phones is a massive issue, but we need phones, obviously, but I think it's just having that control back, I think, and just being dictated to by an algorithm. So
Well, you have to remember that these positive effects you get from engaging with friends is a consequence of doing stuff with them. It's laughing, it's singing, it's dancing, having a meal together, or whatever it may be, or telling stories. And you can't do that if people aren't paying attention. So you're not going to get the benefits. It's a group activity, even if it's only a group of two. It's a group activity, and you're not going to get those benefits if you are on your phone, because the phone doesn't have that sense of deep eyeball to eyeball engagement. You can't no matter how wonderful this technology is, it's very different sense of seeing each other on a screen, as it were, as we are, but to sitting across the table and be able to stare into somebody else's eyeballs and reach out across the table and pat them on the back.
And it's like these AI friends, that said that they can solve loneliness. It's like, at the end of the day, it's not going to solve it. If they can't look after someone's cat or water their plants, it's not a solution.
Absolutely, exactly so. I mean, it's a kind of, I don't know, it's a kind of cheap solution, a partial solution to a problem, which, okay, it may alleviate some degree of loneliness, but actually all you're doing is having a conversation with yourself, with an avatar in your own mind, because the avatar on the screen is simply repeating to you what it thinks you want to know.
It makes us more disconnected as society, because people then won't want to go outside. They'll become too comfortable. And I think that's the other thing as well. People become too comfortable. People don't want to get outside their comfort zone. And then people don't grow and thrive as individuals. So it's it's kind of just adding to the problem, I think. It's not solving it.
Yes, I can see that it, for certain kinds of people, maybe it's a useful solution, but I think, for the population in general, it's not really going to do what its designers are sort of promising on the tin can.
Definitely.
There is nothing to replace being physically present with somebody, and it it really is a case of in real life, how you learn is that somebody disagrees with you, and persuades you that actually you're wrong, or you can have a discussion about something, and maybe you don't resolve it, you both end up disagreeing, but you're happy to go away and accept that the other person has a different view. And the problem with anything, the way AI works, at least at the moment, unless they get a lot more sophisticated about it, is that it just really reproduces what you already do, in the way that the whole system is designed to keep sending you advertisements for the things you've
Yeah.
asked about in the past.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't necessarily get
Definitely.
something completely new out of the blue.
Yeah, I mean, we use AI in our app, but the idea is it's like a Beluga Pal, so it's like your friend. But the idea is it's not to be too relied on, it's just to be there
Yeah,
for encouragement, to nudge you.
yeah,
And I think that's what we're trying to do is embrace kind of people presence and purpose and get people off their phones, but
right.
reconnect themselves, others, build awareness, to kind of tackle it as a systemic issue that it is. So yeah, so why do you think Beluga Pods could potentially solve loneliness? Do you think it's possible? And like, why is that, do you think?
Oh, no, it can certainly do so, but I think it goes back to this basic principle that you need to um, be exposed to or have the opportunity to meet people, and preferably people who are kind of like-minded, because that's the basis of friendship. Is you have
Mhm.
the people you're close friends with are people who do in general share your interests and like the same kinds of things. That's what makes the relationship tick over, as it were. And the whole point about Beluga Pods in that sense is essentially to provide you with that opportunity to meet people who might make a suitable friend. But what happens after that can't
Yeah,
be calculated for. You can't make people be friends.
yeah,
All you can do is provide them the opportunity. And after that, it's an organic thing. It works or it doesn't work. Okay, if
yeah.
it doesn't work, try somewhere else, as it were. But
Makes
or
sense.
try a different
Yeah,
pod.
yeah, yeah,
uh,
exactly, exactly. Try another pod and we can help
Try
them
another
get
pod.
to that point. But
Yeah.
this first stage, we're kind of building the community first. It's all private, no one can match yet, but we ask people what pods they want. But
Right.
this first stage is about connection to themselves and helping people get
Yeah.
off their phones, reconnect, because sometimes people are with people, but they feel isolated and alone.
Yes.
So, and I think this what we spoke about earlier about the connection where spreading kindness, reconnecting kind of society where we do look up, but I think because it's, we're all in autopilot now, it's to help
Yes.
people connect to themselves. So what would you advise in that sense?
Uh, in the end, you have to look for, or you don't have to look for, but it seems to work this way. You look for people who are most similar to you. So you've really got to talk to them in the end,
Yeah, yeah,
and kind of I mean, not talk to them in the sense of probing them. Well, do you like this
yeah, yeah,
group,
yeah,
pop group? Do you like that kind of sport? That kind of thing. That kind of, it, those sort of things come out of a conversation naturally. So you're probing, but without asking directly, and it's just the opportunity to find out how much you share. These are what we call the 7 pillars of friendship, these sort of 7 dimensions of friendship, which reflect your interests and your world, how you see the world, and so on. And in the course of conversation, you kind of, in your mind, tick these off as you go. Oh,
yeah,
yes, they like the same things as me. They're Tiddlywinks fan, or
yeah,
they like playing, I don't know, tennis or whatever it may be.
yeah,
Or
yeah,
they have the same moral views as I do, or political views as I do, and you go through ticking these off. The same sense of humor. Oh, yes, they like Led Zeppelin as well.
yeah, yeah,
Whatever it may, whichever particular kind of music you like. And at the end of this processing period, we can actually see it happening in telephone call databases when people first meet each other. You can see them ticking these off, as it were, and then deciding, is this going to be a friend for life or not, or
yeah,
just a casual friend?
yeah,
And they
exactly.
get assigned, you assign those people to those categories of friendship
Hmm.
that is appropriate for them. But this small group, inner core group of maybe 5 best friends who really make the difference to how your world goes round.
Yeah,
It takes a bit of effort to actually find these people. They're
mm,
out there.
yeah, yeah,
It's just having the opportunity to search enough
yeah,
of the
exactly,
haystacks to actually
exactly.
locate them.
But then the other thing as well is about this kind of, people so disconnected, they're around people but not with people as such. And they can't, connect. It's this notion of, people need to love themselves first before they're with others, because we look for too
Yes,
quick fix in society, and it's not,
yes.
life doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So do you think that people need to be more aware about how they're feeling, build confidence, like get out of their comfort zone, build these kind of social skills, and then can kind of help align with friends going through either the same
Yeah.
thing or others that are more in line with their kind of character?
No, I think a bit of effort is required.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. And a bit of effort means you have to have a little degree of self-confidence to go out there and sort of meet people, because if it's always slightly strange and off-putting going into a strange environment, where you don't know anybody.
Yeah.
30 seconds after you've gone into the door, you really think, I'm going home.
Yeah.
And you've got to stick with it. You've got to go, no, I've got to stick with it.
Yeah.
Because building friendships with any group is a matter of, as much as anything really, of staying power. If you don't keep turning up, you'll never create friendships. But if you keep turning up, even if you're hanging around on the edges, as it were, and not talking that much, in due course, over a period of time, but it doesn't take forever, people will start talking to you naturally. Oh,
Yeah.
I've seen you before.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. And it's good to start with strangers first, do you think? Going out, like smiling to someone, to build that confidence up, do you think?
I think so, yes. I mean, there is always a slight worry these days that if somebody smiles at you,
Yeah, literally, what's wrong with them?
yes, exactly. But I think we've got to get a grip and get over that. That's part of the symptom almost of that whole problem. But yes, I mean, it's just built as at one level, it's as much as anything, it is just building up confidence. I think if you smile more at people and say hello more often to them, it means that the next time you're in a social environment, you feel that much more
Yeah,
confident about sort of opening a conversation with people.
definitely. No, definitely. Well, no, that's really interesting. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll do this again and discuss
Very
more.
good.
And let me just finish the recording. Thank you very much for your time, Robin, and look forward to doing it again soon. Thanks.
That'll be great fun to do, Georgie.
Thank you so much. Right.